Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at the new Mafex Hush Batman figure, which is, well, let me just start off by saying Batman's my favorite, and so I'm going to try to hide any of that favoritism as much as possible, whether it leads me to being too generous or too critical of the figure. I'm going to try to hide that as much as possible, as best I can, but this happens to be not only Batman because he's my favorite, but it happens to be one of my favorite versions of Batman too, so I'm going to do my very, very best to keep this as neutral as possible, and hopefully I can accomplish that by the end of the video. But this figure, not surprisingly, is really good in a lot of ways. And I say not surprisingly because we know Mafex can make really, really excellent figures. We saw it in Spider-Man, almost completely good. Overall an excellent figure. They've done it a bunch of other times too. They've also had some serious duds along the way, and they've almost always consistently had bad QC. There have been a few shining examples of good stuff though, so this figure could fall anywhere in that mix. It looked like it was going to be good from the photos. How did it turn out is the question, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's go ahead and get it off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands just about to the very tippity top of his ears, his bat ears, not his human ears, about 16.5 centimeters. That makes him pretty close to 6.5 inches. Now, unfortunately, all my stuff is packed away right now for reasons, so I can't do a direct comparison, but I have measured basically every figure that's ever existed. So if you want to compare heights, you can do that. It'll put this guy just slightly short of your Marvel Legends or DCUC type of scaling. Probably definitely close enough to be okay. Alright, now first impressions of this guy, we have to talk about the coloring. It's not exactly as it was advertised. He looks even more saturated on camera right now for me. I don't know how it's going to end up looking in the edit, and I'll try to make sure it's as close to real life as possible. But if you look at the packaging, he's a lot more blue and a lot more yellow. I personally prefer that. I don't think it's as accurate though. So I'm pretty sure the Hush color scheme was fairly muted, which is what this looks like more or less. To me, this looks way better, but I just want to note that there is a difference. You can decide what you prefer. I will also note that on this, the cape is nowhere near as big and massive and clunky. Like, you can easily do these kind of things on the package. In real life, you may be able to achieve that, but he has an absolutely gigantic, ginormous cape, which is okay for some things. Like, I know a lot of people are wanting to do that pose where he's got his leg up on the little gargoyle thing and the cape's all in the background like Spawn's cape, and this cape can do that because it's humongous. But it is, as far as I'm concerned, you can decide for yourself what you think about this. As far as I'm concerned, the cape is too much. It's too big. It's way too cumbersome, especially around the shoulders. Like, if you want to just pin it back like that, even that's too bulky. But even getting it to stay like that on its own is going to be very taxing. You may be able to achieve something if you're trying to hide stuff like around the corner maybe. I don't know. It's a really, really big cape for a figure this size. I know the fan's blowing it a lot. Let me see if I can do it this way. I need the fan on, it's too hot. Plus it looked cool on the turnaround, but look how big that cape is. It is just massive. So if you like that, then you're aces. If you think it's too big, well, you're gonna have to deal with it or replace it with something else. We'll get into the posability of the cape later, but I just wanted to go over the look of it. It is a non-stretchy material. It's not spandex, which most companies would use for this kind of material because it doesn't fray. They've done a good job with the stitching and the non-fraying issue. That's fine. This will take wrinkles probably a little bit more easily, but mine came out of the package looking pretty good, so that's okay. Now, as far as the paint job on this guy goes, other than the colors being much more muted than the packaging, I will say it's not great. His bat logo, it's not terrible, but it is not lined up well. I mean, it's sculpted in, and still there's a lot of gray showing through around the edges. That does bother me because there's no reason. This thing costs somewhere between $80 to $90 depending on how you get it. Of course, if you import it, 80 bucks-ish plus shipping, you're sitting around 90 after shipping, no matter how you get it, 90 to 100 bucks, give or take. So that's a very hefty price point for a 6.5-inch figure. I don't think we should have to deal with uneven paint jobs on the chest. And while we're here, I want to show you my belt is nasty looking too. I don't understand how they managed that, but it just looks, hopefully it shows up on camera, but down here it just looks terrible. There's a big streak going down the middle, and then down here there's junk too. I don't care for that. The line work on the gloves is pretty clean. I don't have too many issues there. Down here on the boots, it's pretty not clean. For $100, I expect clean lines. I mean, this is Marvel Legends level painting again, but it's 5 times as expensive. So there is that. Another issue I have, which I haven't even posed the legs too much yet, both of my inner thighs have paint on them, probably from this. Can't say, I didn't do it. If you're not looking too close though, it looks pretty good. There is some shading throughout, which is good. It's mostly on the blue parts, which is less good because they get kind of muddy looking. But it doesn't look too bad, and it is mostly a satin or matte finish, which is nice. Let's look at the face paint on this guy. Again, we're talking about a $100 figure, give or take. I love the head sculpts. I think they're very nice. And the paints are clean enough, but they're not great. I don't know how well it's showing up on the face, but the skin tone has some spots that are definitely transparent. You can see blue coming through, and that's definitely not good. And we'll look at the other heads as we go through the accessories. So ultimately, it looks nice overall. Oh, I guess I should talk about proportions. That's always a big deal with Mafex. They've screwed up a bunch recently. His proportions are pretty darn good. They're not perfect, but they're pretty darn good, enough that I won't bother going over them, other than the chest does seem a little bit small, and the way they did it, I've heard some people say it looks sunken in because of the way the cowl sticks up and this tucks in. I agree. I don't think they handled that as well as they could have. I like their idea. I like their concept of having the cape tucked in this way, but he looks like he's got a giant hole in his chest on either side. And it doesn't have as big a chest as this version of Batman typically has, so that is worth mentioning. I don't think most people are going to care once it's posed up and you're not looking for problems like you do in a review. I don't think this whole area is going to be too much of an issue, but it is worth mentioning. Last thing worth mentioning for the aesthetic, in the package, at least on mine, he came with his arms adjusted all the way down, and it made him look like he had gorilla proportions, which even still doesn't look that bad. But if you put the arms up to where they belong on that ball peg, his proportions are just fine. I have no issue with that. So yeah, aesthetically speaking, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good, and you have to decide how you feel about the cape. But it's overall pretty good. I do think though, for the price point, the paints are nowhere near where they belong. Not even close. You might like the figure. I enjoy the figure myself personally, but for $80 to $100, this basic level of paint job should be immaculate. And it's not. So 7 out of 10 for the aesthetic. That price point, if they're gonna charge that much, they need to step up their game. This is a super basic paint job. It needs to be clean and crisp, and it's not. Okay, as for accessories, we have 3 different heads. The head you already saw on him, the stern normal cowled head. Then we have a cowled head with his mouth open. It looks okay, except again the flesh tone has a lot of transparentness going on, like spots of it where you can see blue coming through, and his teeth have a kind of a gray wash on them, which makes him look like he has braces. It's not terrible unless you get up close, but it doesn't look great in terms of paint. Sculpt is fantastic. We also have an uncowled head, which has all the same issues as far as the skin tone having specks of blue going through. Mine has a spot on the chin where there's just no paint at all. Again, good head sculpt, and it's painted cleanly other than those kinds of issues. As for hands, we have 2 fist hands that come on him in the package. 2 hands that look like fist hands, but he looks like he's supposed to be gripping something, and I don't know what it's supposed to be because the gripping part isn't in the right place. And then we have some hands with the batarangs in them, which look really cool. We have some hands with grapnel launchers. Those are good. We have some open hands for holding batarangs or just for posing. And then we have some other open hands for posing. Then we have some other open hands for posing. And then we have 2 different sets of batarangs with 2 each. We get a grapnel thingy, a grapnel line, whatever you want to call it, which is actually a piece of metal. Don't bend that. That's probably a bad idea. And then you also get a short one that can go in the grapnel launcher. That's awesome. And lastly, we get a display stand, which will be good for posing him in the air. So that is a good array of accessories. I do wish the faces were painted better, but that goes back to the aesthetic and the low quality of paint we've been getting from this company. Otherwise, the accessories are pretty darn good. I'm going to give it a 9. That's a bunch. I don't know what else we could really ask for, so accessories are decent. Let's talk about the articulation. Again, for the price point, it better be darn good. Plus, that's what they're supposed to be. The head is on a double ball peg, neck is also on a ball peg. It moves around just fine. No real issues there. I don't have any loose joint issues, although swapping the heads, I do tend to pull the neck. I mean, even if I'm grabbing the head, the neck tends to come out with it. That's kind of a hassle, but it's not a problem. We don't have any looseness. It just tends to pop there rather than at the top. So no big deal. Now for the cape, I did mention we were talking about it for articulation, and that's because we have some wiring going on. It feels like metal to me. I guess it could be plastic, but it doesn't feel like plastic. It tends to hold its shape better and go back better. So we have on either side, one on the main perimeter of the cape, then we have another one on this next seam. Is it the next? No, it's the second one from next. So we go down one, and then we have this right here, another wired one, which is helpful for posing. I do think it's a missed opportunity to not have any in the middle main back part at all. That seems like it's going to make it harder to achieve posing that you would prefer to be able to do, but still having 4 pieces of wire in the cape is pretty nice. The good thing about this, and I assume everybody's going to have this on their figure, I don't know for sure though, they did the right thing and the wire is actually connected in here so that you can bend this up and it'll hold up mostly. Of course, the cape is very big and heavy and the wire is very thin, but you can see that the wire is actually connected there on this side, which is how it's supposed to be done. The wires are useless if they're just floppy. Almost useless. Speaking of, this one is not connected. This one is totally floppy. I can bend it all day long and it's just gonna fall down. It'll hold the bend, but it's gonna fall down. Let me know, guys, if you have this. Is yours connected on both sides? Is yours floppy on both sides? What's your situation like? But otherwise, as far as capes go, that's a good wiring. That's fine. If the cape wasn't humongous, it'd be super practical and very awesome for posing. This cape is there's just so much of it. At this scale, it looks like he has comforters connected to him. So that's cumbersome. I imagine some people are going to like it and some people aren't. I would definitely prefer a smaller cape. For the shoulders, we have the ball peg that goes into the torso, and this part right here is just a floating cap. So you can move this all around, plenty of range there. You can raise the arms up better than horizontal. That's all very nice. You do get your full rotation. No problems there. I don't have any looseness or extra stiffness. As I said that, I'm starting to get some squeaking. That kind of squeaking can lead to an extra tight joint because of what's happening actually inside the joint, or it could end up getting loose. So be very careful. A little bit of lubrication seems like a good option there. Pure silicone works. It's probably the easiest, so that's what I would recommend. Bicep swivel is okay. You could use what's the powder? NTPF? NTP? I can't remember what it is now. There's a powder. I probably got those letters completely wrong. There's a powder lubrication that works too, but silicone's fine. Bicep swivel is fine. Double jointed elbow is really nice. Looks good. Functions well. Wrists are on little tiny ball hinges, and they give you plenty of range in any necessary direction, so that's good. Torso joint. I've heard some people complaining about this because there's a big gap. I guess technically it's a big gap. It doesn't strike me as being particularly egregious. Plus, you can just do that. Like, just pose it away. You want articulation or not. It leans back pretty well. It is a double ball peg, by the way, so you have the main functionality, and then you have the adjustment on the top, which is what I was talking about in that one other video. However, leaning forward on just that top joint is very minimal. It does not have a ton of range there. Leaning back is pretty good. You can get back there pretty far. Side to side works reasonably well. Can't really get too much farther out of that even if you wanted to. And then of course you have your rotation. So that top joint is pretty good, other than going forward is very limited. And it does have some squeaking and it's kind of tight, so be aware that you could end up with a tight joint. His belt is connected in the back. I don't see why that's necessary. That seems to me like to be a waste of a step, which can only impede articulation. But it is a separate piece, but it's connected, so that's a little strange. But the ball peg down here gives you plenty of range going forward, so combine that with the top and you should be fine. Going back, it has a lot less, which is interesting that they're kind of inverted or opposite of each other. This one goes back pretty well, but not down here. And this one doesn't go very far forward, but it does down here. But that does lead to being able to achieve most posability. It does work side to side nicely, and it does rotate as well. So maybe it's not perfect, but that's perfectly acceptable range of motion. Yeah, I guess maybe it could look better and be less gappy. I don't think that's something that's really a big deal. This, though, You guys see that? I don't think mine's separated. It just is that way. I can see some glue in there. Yeah, I can't separate it. It's just glued like that. It's not like I can't pry it apart without popping the glue. It is held together. It's just gappy. And it's ugly on this side too. That's not great. Mafex is like, on some of their releases, they're so close to being excellent, but then they still do weird things like that. At least make it at an angle. Whatever. Okay, for the hips, we do have hinged hips. We'll see if that's a good thing in a second. The hinged ball peg, so you can leave them up there or you can drop them down. Let's see if we leave them up, what kind of range we have. Not very far at all. I mean, it's okay, but for Batman, that's not very much. If we bring them down, can we go any farther? No, the hips don't go out to the side any farther than that, no matter what, which is gonna be fine for most posing, but you're not gonna be doing any crazy kicks or anything like that. It's fairly basic. It's about 45 degrees. Going forward, you're gonna get it about horizontal, it looks like, because even if you drop it down, it's down right now, and you're only getting about horizontal, not quite. So pretty limiting hips, that's unfortunate. You do have a thigh swivel in there, which is good, and we hear a lot of potential problem going on in the future. It's not breaking yet, but it might. It feels like it wants to. Yeah, I don't know about that. Okay, I was just looking at the anatomy. They did a good job with the muscle groups. His legs do seem a little bit thin, but not too bad. Yeah, he's a little bit lankier than I would prefer probably, but he's not bad. It's still fine. Okay, so for the knees, really good range. Really, like, these are some of the best knees, aesthetically speaking. I'm so nervous about moving that hip that's squeaking. They did a really good job with the knee, other than the angle of the leg. So do you see how the knee looks really good on its own? But then if you look at the leg, it's, well, I guess it's not too bad. The knee's kind of, are you able to tell? I'm not doing a good job of describing it. I haven't even used many words. The knee is at a weird angle. Like, it goes up here to down here. It's at like a 5 degree angle maybe. That's very strange. The legs are sculpted such that it works, but it is at a very strange angle. Yeah, nobody's probably going to notice that, and it looks good otherwise, so that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but it is unique. Interesting to see that. Okay, and then lastly we have the ankles and the feetses, and so here we go. Make sure we're focused. They go reasonably far back. That's pretty much as far as you would want it. Going forward, most companies don't like to bring them forward, and I get humans don't have that much range going forward. Yeah, but it's an action figure. I don't really care. I need it to be able to pose, and humans can flex and do things that action figures can't. Okay, so it doesn't go that far forward. Toe joint is really far back on the foot, and it's very floppy, so that's not going to help much. So again, you got to get that articulation range out of the ankle. You can't count on the toe joint. But we do have an excellent ball hinge. Let's see if I can hold it in frame. An excellent ball hinge for the whole ankle, but it achieves a wonderful ankle rocker. That is really good. Okay, so the articulation on this guy is definitely not bad. It is up there with their good stuff for sure. There's some stuff that could definitely be better, and I am concerned about the longevity of a lot of this articulation. But to me, look, I didn't even do that. The cape just ended up that way. The cape is so cumbersome for me. I don't care for the oversized cape. I would definitely prefer it to be smaller. I'm going to include that in the articulation only because even if you do prefer it, it is still gonna be there, and it's gonna be really bulky, and you have to like do something. Like, that looks fine, but it doesn't do that on its own. There's not enough wiring, and it's not strong enough. Anyway, his articulation's really solid overall. I'm gonna give it an 8. There are definitely some issues. We'll see if he ends up breaking. I haven't had any issues with that yet, but a lot of squeaking and squealing and screeching. So that does concern me. But yeah, all in all, it's a very strong release. I think most people are happy about that. I know a lot of people were psyched about this Batman, but then as their X-Men characters started rolling out, it was like, maybe not. We'll see. I would definitely like to see them do a Batman with a lot less cape that isn't the Frank Miller Batman, even though I'm getting that, and that looks like it's going to be good too. I want a more traditional looking Batman. I'd like well, it doesn't matter what I like. Okay, so final verdict on this guy. It looks good overall. Paints don't fit the price point at all. Articulation does. I think it's reasonable. The sculpt is definitely good enough. I wouldn't mind him being a little thicker in a few places and things like that, but I don't think it's enough to worry about. And it really just comes down to the paint and the cape being a potential problem. So final verdict on this guy, given the price point of a very high $80 to $100 price point, I will say I'm still gonna go 8. I think it's a strong release. Lots of accessories. It looks good. It poses well for the most part. It's really just the paint and the cape that hold it back. Plural. So I think that's good. I think most people are gonna be happy. He does have long lower legs, smaller upper legs than he should, but still, by and large, it's aesthetically pleasing. Proportions are good. And I think most people are going to like it. So there you go, guys. Let me know what you think about this figure in the comments section below. Let me know what you thought about the video by giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And if you haven't subscribed, you might want to. I have new videos out almost every single day and thousands already on the channel. So make sure you come back for all of that. And in the meantime, keep collecting.